Well, hello everyone, and welcome to what should be the 250th American anniversary, our 4th of July special. If we hold it that long, we've got a show coming up. We're going to keep it as short as we can. The microphone is photobombing in on us. We're just going to deal with that today just to make sure we get good audio on us, because I want everybody to hear exactly what I got to say. Let's get to it. This is going to be on a recent decision, Pung versus Isabella County, Michigan, 25-95 judgment. Pung versus Isabella County, docket number 2595, Supreme Court, 9/0/23, June 26, that the Constitution does not require the government to pay a homeowner the fair market value of a foreclosed property following a fairly conducted tax sale. Did you catch that? As long as the sale was legal, the actual auction was legal, doesn't matter what the property was worth. They can steal your property. They can, in this case, it was like a $2,000 tax value that had actually been vacated or ruled that it didn't have to be, whatever, it didn't matter. The county still went in and took the people's property and sold it at a steep loss to the owners. They got their money, they got their $2,000 out of it. And the whole thing was they didn't have any obligation to make sure that they actually sold it for fair value. That's the rub. So we're going to look at it, see what it says it was actually worth, what their own government's assessor's office said the house was worth. They didn't get it. They didn't get it. And SCOTUS says this is legal for the government to do this to you. Let's look again, right here. All right, let's zoom in, make sure, take me off of it so we can read this together. The court vacated the lower court's judgment and remanded the case, while it rejected the family's Fifth Amendment claim that compensation must be equal to the property assessed value. And again, this wasn't one that they had assessed. This is one the assessor's office assessed. Value, let me get it up high because it's going to give me that Google thing, so we got it so big. It allowed further review into whether or not a specific tax sale and auction procedures were unconstitutionally unfair. So the door's open, but it's just pretty well much done. They sold it. Here's the number. The original dispute arose after Isabella County, Michigan, of course, what do you expect in a blue state like that, run by blue people? Michigan foreclosed on a family home over a $2,200 disputed tax debt. The county sold the property at auction for $76,000, leaving a surplus that the family argued fell drastically short of the $194,400 to $200,000 value of the home. So what it is, Michigan, Isabella County, Michigan, stole this person's house over a sketchy $2,200 tax bill, sold it at auction for $76,000 to, I don't know who, to somebody special, I'm sure. And that guy turned around and flipped it for more than that. The guy made, I think, close to $200,000, sold it for close to $200,000. So the justices rejected the argument that the remaining excess funds violated the Fifth Amendment's excessive fine clause. So that's what it says. That's what the Supreme Court 9-0. Even this is supposed to be a conservative court. It ain't that conservative, is it? Not really. All right, let's see if I got my court here pulled up. I'm gonna have to shift the plus to make this bigger for us. Let's do this. Just switch over to that screen. All right, let me get in the bottom corner. All right, we've got the actual opinions. October 2025. This is when it was put in. It got argued. Look at that. February 2026. It didn't get decided until June, till last month. We just came out. But here's the brief statement. The Pung family owed $2241.93 in real property taxes, so local authorities in Isabella County, Michigan, initiated foreclosure proceedings and sold the Pung home, which was assessed as $194,400 for tax purposes. Did the Pung family have anything to say about what it was assessed for? No, the government just decided that's what it's going to be, and so we're going to take your money, your taxes, based upon what we say your house is worth, for $76,000 at public auction. Michael Pung sued in federal court that the district court granted Pung's partial summary judgment based upon his Fifth Amendment claim. Michael Pung sued in federal court. District court granted Pung partial summary judgment on the Fifth Amendment claim. The court held that Pung should receive only the surplus proceeds from the tax sale. Different from what the county sold it for, not what it was worth. What they got for it at auction, not what it was actually worth. The district court also rejected Pung's claim under the Eighth Amendment excessive fines clause. The Sixth Circuit Court affirmed. Now it says here, the proper baseline was held, saying that just compensation following the tax sale is an auction sale price, not the property's hypothetical fair market value, at least when the sale is within the fairly conducted. They did it legally. As long as they followed the law in the process of auctioning it off, the value apparently doesn't matter. Now, my guess is the only legal way they could justify this not being a violation of the takings clause, and again, I'm not a lawyer, is if they said because it was legally auctioned off according to the law, then the market value would have been what that auction brought. The only thing I can think of. That if it went to auction and they were not violating a rule, they didn't have an error in that process, that the day of the auction set the market value. Not what the county had been accusing the family of owning, the accused value of the assessment, what they said it was worth, which was what triggered the tax debt, which was what triggered the auction. So to me, it's fruit of a poisonous tree, which gets into evidence, not actually procedures. But to me, this is just not right. But wait till you see why they upheld it. Pung's reliance on a recent concurrence by Justice Supreme Court of Michigan's interpreting state constitution does not shed much light on the takings clause. See, they brought it in there of Oakland, and then they cited Oakland case, blah, blah, blah. Cases about seizure of multiple pieces of property do not help him because the county sold just one parcel of Pung's property, and Pung does not argue that the parcel could have been subdivided. I want you to notice that crappy little double speak. They're trying to say, well, we can't really take the previous taking clause issue because that was on multiple pieces of property, and you didn't ask us about multiple pieces of property. You only asked us about the sale of one piece of property, and you didn't even take the opportunity to argue that it was big. It could have been chopped up and sold maybe as, I don't know, 2 townhouses instead of one actual house. This is how crappy these things get when you deal with some of these attorneys out here. Eminent domain cases do not help him either, because even in that context, the court has refused designate market value as the sole measure of just compensation, and they came up with a court case there. Fair market value is not an appropriate measurement of just compensation in this context because the owners generally avoid tax sales. Let me reread that case. I read it wrong because it is 4th of July, or at least it will be when this airs. Fair market value is not an appropriate measure of just compensation in this context because owners can generally avoid tax sales.
You sure about that? You sure about that? You sure about that?
So, they're basically saying it's like a comparative negligence issue. Well, you were in the wrong, Mr. Pung, because you could have avoided the tax sale. You could have just paid the money that the government was extorting from you on a potentially bogus assessment, right? But whatever happened there, you didn't pay that taxes, whether that was bogus or not, and that triggered the tax and the sale. But that's not relevant to the fact that the government just stole your land and sold it for way under its value. And you're just hosed. You can't fight City Hall. Go back to this. Let's go back to me in the corner. So let's get to the reason why. You're not going to believe this. You're not going to believe this. This whole paragraph, and let me zoom back in because that's just going to be something I want you to see. And let me see if I can plus this up here on our page to get you a good picture of this. Do I need to slide it at the bottom? No, let me just back up one little notch here. So we get it all. I don't know if you can see it. I'm going to read this really slow so I don't have to read it twice and bore you. Pung's fair market value theory would impose unprecedented burdens on jurisdictions that wish to collect unpaid taxes and might well make sales tax impractical. What they're trying to say, make the tax sales of unpaid taxes impractical. Under Pung's rule, tax sale would often net the government a loss, meaning if they couldn't get what their tax assessor said it was worth, they'd be on the hook maybe for the difference between what they were taxing at it and what they could actually sell for it. If they wanted to claim one was actual value of the property, they'd have to pick one and stick with it. But that would undercut their regular tax collections if they had to go with the assessor's value, and it would make them have to pay out too much if the assessor was greedy in their assessment. They'd have to pay more tax, which would mean, you get this, then when they sold a piece of land they were trying to steal for tax values, they might end up having to pay more in the lawsuit than it was worth to take it. Kind of like a personal injury law or any any other entity in the world that would have a dispute. Is it worth taking to court to get your small claims of your $2,000? That's based upon something that the homeowner had no input whatsoever in. They had no input in deciding what that value was. The government just said, this is what it's worth. You will pay me based upon what we say it's worth. And if it doesn't have any repercussions, if the government doesn't have any repercussions like this would have done, Pung's value idea is that, well, pick one. If it's worth $194,000 like you say it is, maybe he didn't think it was, but he had to pay tax on $194,000, so shouldn't the government have to pay him the net proceeds difference between a theoretical sale at $194 and whatever he owed? Yes, but that's not what the government said. Look here. It would require the government to sell at a loss and pay out delinquent taxpayer himself, rendering the tax sales infeasible as a debt collection mechanism, which means the government isn't smart enough to find any other way to collect $2,200 from Mr. Pung that they say they owe him other than stealing his house. This is a bit more of a bully than I would like to admit on America's 250th anniversary, our Day of Independence. Apparently, independence still only goes for the government. So, remember the king. When you take the king's shilling, you owe your life to the king. Well, in this case, we're giving the king our shilling, and we still owe him our life. That Pung's novel interpretation of the takings clause would eliminate this long outstanding practice of strong evidence that has his interpretation as incorrect. In other words, well, we just found a reason to say it wasn't true. But basically, yeah, they just stole it. The government was the one who said that you owe us this amount of money that you can't get out of because you sinful person, you decide to own private property, and we say it's worth this amount of money, and we're going to get our money from you. We're going to extort our revenue from you that we take to run our little government based upon the property owners. And if you don't like it, we'll threaten to take you to court, we'll foreclose on your home, and we'll steal your property. Now, that's what they did. That is in effect what they did. And if we go back to that first little ruling here, let me minus it back down a little bit, we will see what? That it was a 9-0 unanimous decision. The Constitution does not require the government to pay a homeowner the fair market value of a foreclosed property following a fairly conducted tax sale. So about the only thing I can advise you to do, my my friends and chillins, is don't let the government ever steal your property for unpaid taxes. Because I guarantee you, there'll be vultures standing on the dead tree looking over the corpse of what was your financial life, willing to pick your bones, or under a cross if you're a Christian, under the cross, gambling for your clothes. You come to your own conclusion. That's just mine. But know that it has been happened recently. This has happened recently, and they affirm that you have no rights. Once they decide to take your property for an unpaid debt that they imposed upon you without your say-so, part of their excuse was, well, you could have avoided the sale by paying the tax even if it was unfair. Maybe they could have paid it, maybe they couldn't have paid it. I don't know the financial condition of these people. What if it was somebody who was old and in their dotage and in hospital on fixed income and didn't have $2,000 to pay a bogus tax bill because they were paying their Medicaid bills or the balance of their Medicaid? They didn't have a good Part B plan or whatever, right? We don't know. But you can't fight City Hall. And they just proved it. Even with a conservative court, they still allowed the government to take people's property and not pay them fair market value. How about that for an eye-opener on the 4th of July? See ya! We'll see you next week.
You and I are told increasingly we have to choose between a left or right. Well, I'd like to suggest there is no such thing as a left or right. There's only an up or down, up to man's old age dream, the ultimate in individual freedom consistent with law and order, or down to the ant heap of totalitarianism, and regardless of their sincerity, their humanitarian motives, those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course.